today. I really appreciate your time, given all the responsibilities and votes and the daily pressures of being a U.S. Senator.
Well, I apologize. We've got a couple of votes coming up in the middle of this that kind of messed with the time of this, so I'm sorry about that.
Oh no, listen, we'll take what we can. I really appreciate it. If it works for you, sir, may we dive right in?
Yes, absolutely.
Super. Well, I'm going to just do a very quick CV, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Senator Gardner is the junior senator for Colorado since 2015. Senator Gardner is a leading voice for U.S. national security and a forceful advocate for why America's relationship with Taiwan is in U.S. national interest. That has been a consistent position the senator has taken, and he is and remains a leading voice in advocating for strong U.S.-Taiwan relations. Senator, if you'd like to say a few words, and then I know that some of our membership have some questions for you.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks to you for having letting me have this opportunity to engage with businesses in Taiwan and the United States that share a very common interest in the success of both Taiwan and the United States and our people. So thank you. I have truly enjoyed the opportunity to visit with businesses in Taiwan and to build a strong relationship with President Tsai. I have now met with President Tsai a number of times, including being able to walk through the Daocheng market. If I said that correct, probably not. But to enjoy a walk through the market with President Tsai, talking about the people, the birthplace of Taiwan democracy, and of course, then just a year later or so, being able to host President Tsai in Colorado, the first time a president of Taiwan had visited certainly Colorado, but had visited the interior of the United States. We were able to visit places like the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We were able to visit the National Center for Atmospheric Research, where a Taiwan scientist is leading the development of a weather satellite that will help provide better information to U.S. and Taiwan science community as we understand typhoons and other weather events better and better. So that's a great opportunity to engage in our economy between the state of Colorado and Taiwan. Over the COVID-19 experience, Taiwan was showing and continues to show incredible leadership at the world stage when it comes to healthcare. Providing millions and millions of masks that were direly needed in the United States, including hundreds of thousands in Colorado at a time we desperately needed it. If you go back to the Ebola breakout in Africa in the 2014 timeframe, the leadership that Taiwan continued to show then and continued to show over the years as they contributed dollars and efforts to the international effort to push back on the Ebola outbreak. And the list goes on and on. The United States and Taiwan share so much in common. We share people. We share a common affection for democracy. We share a living element of democracy and free markets. And one of our most important trade partners as well has led to many opportunities, including what I just sent out in terms of a letter to Ambassador Lighthizer requesting the development and the free trade agreement with Taiwan, a BTA, so that we can move forward with U.S.-Taiwan economies in a way that will create beneficial opportunities for both Taiwan and the United States. We've passed a number of important pieces of legislation. I've led the passage of the TAIPEI Act, which of course helps the United States create a diplomatic strategy as it relates to engagement around the globe with Taiwan. The International Participation Act to make sure that Taiwan has a place at the table at our most important international organizations, World Health Assemblies and beyond, so that we can make sure that the leadership that Taiwan has already shown is fully embraced around the globe because it's desperately needed. Legislation that would allow Interpol status for Taiwan. Those are things that will make a difference as we uphold the law internationally and we obey the rights of our citizens and our common allies. So really, this is an opportunity for the United States to advance this affinity that we share for Taiwan. And I can think of a few other nations, a few other places, a few other groups, a few other associations that have the same kind of bipartisan support that the United States has with Taiwan. And I think that's an important point that we all make when we look to Taiwan and we see this relationship. There is tremendous support, not because it's Democrats supporting it, not because it's Republicans supporting it, but because we have Democrat and Republicans and everyone in between supporting the people of Taiwan and the work that we continue to do together. We've seen what's happened in Hong Kong. We've seen the aggression that China has shown in the South China Seas. We've seen continued ignoring of international law and the concern of the Chinese Communist Party and the malign influence that they are trying to foist upon its regional actors and upon global systems. And Taiwan is an incredibly important partner in making sure that we have a rules-based system that is governed by our values, Western values of transparency, rule of law. And we need to make sure that we continue that effort. So, Rupert, thank you. I'll stop there. There's a lot more that can be said, a lot more that I want to learn from you. But please, I hope that everybody will find this a heartening moment for U.S.-Taiwan relationships as we build our security relationship through the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, our generational approach to Asia that we passed a couple of years ago that calls for our free trade efforts with Taiwan. But also the economic opportunities that we have, the people-to-people opportunities that we have, and the fact that a democracy in Asia can share such an important lesson to all of us for human rights around the globe. So thank you very much, Rupert, and I'll turn it over to you, and I'll take it from there.
Senator, thank you so much, sir. You are absolutely right that there is so much to talk about in this relationship. It is so dynamic. The fact that it's bipartisan is hugely significant and important. It takes a great deal of tension out of elections, candidly, because we as a community understand that on Capitol Hill, you and your colleagues on both sides of the chamber really see this as in the national interest of our country. Right. And that allows us to look far further down the path in respect to what's in U.S. national interest. I love that you mentioned also President Tsai's visit to your state last year. Obviously, you've been a forceful advocate for respectful, convenient, and regular visits by senior Taiwan government officials, including President Tsai, who I know you have a personal and strong relationship with. She had just been in New York. Before she came out to you, we had as an organization an opportunity to host her. She is an extremely competent leader, and frankly, if Taiwan weren't caught in some difficult global political issues with the Chinese, I think she would be arguably one of the most important voices in our world. I really do believe that if China did not object so loudly. If I may, sir, I'd love to pivot to this letter that you sent out to Ambassador Lighthizer. We've been arguing and pressing as a community for 20 years, since sort of the early part of the 2000s, the Bush first term, on the importance of a bilateral trade agreement. And our primary barrier has been parochial ag issues in Taiwan, of course, but also how USTR itself views the importance of the Taiwan relationship in respect to China. Could you elaborate a wee bit, please, on what sort of mechanisms you feel Congress has to press USTR on creating some space between the importance of the China economic relationship and the importance of the Taiwan economic relationship? Because what we observe is they get conflated, and the Taiwan economic relationship gets damaged as a consequence.
Yeah, look at this. I think in the letter that we sent, and I believe you have a copy of it, and if you want to share it, please do so. But we talk about the importance of trade with Taiwan. That in 2018, Taiwan was the United States' 12th largest trading partner for goods and services. We imported and exported a total worth of nearly $95.5 billion worth of goods and services. Taiwan was the 15th largest foreign investor in the United States, bringing dollars of investment into the U.S. And U.S. and Taiwanese enterprises together support almost 100,000 jobs on both sides of the Pacific. And so, President Tsai has talked about a high-quality BTA between our countries that would help strengthen our engagement and also set a strong precedent for a rules-based trade order in the Indo-Pacific region. Our relationship with Taiwan stands on its own. Our relationship with Taiwan is not dependent on China. It is not subsistent to China. it is a relationship between the United States and Taiwan. And that's why I think a trade agreement is perfectly appropriate. Beyond that, I think we have a country that has rules-based systems and values that we share that we should encourage in Asia, and have a free trade, a bilateral trade agreement as a result of this opportunity. We have engagement with Taiwan at multiple levels, and this could step that up even more. And when we look around the globe and we try to make sure that people are supporting and engaging Taiwan, what better vehicle to show U.S. leadership, putting our actions where our words are in terms of moving forward with a BTA. This is important. Look, China has no interest in waiting for the United States to do trade agreements or to expand economically. No, they want to compete with us. They want to outcompete the United States. We should use every tool at our disposal, including engaging in BTAs with our great friends to rise to that competition. And when we do that, others in Asia have to recognize that leadership and engage with that as well. And gosh, if we're leading the standards, if we're setting the rules of the road and the rules of the game, so to speak, then everybody's going to be playing by those rules, those systems of fairness and transparency that Taiwan and the United States believe in and agree to. So there are so many reasons for it and why we should do it. I think those are just a few.
Senator, thank you so much. You put it so eloquently. If we go back to the 90s, to some of your predecessors in the Senate who advocated forcefully for US-Taiwan relations, the arguments were mostly predicated around the legacy nature of our relationship. I think that one of the great services you have done and your colleagues have done is that you have significantly broadened the reasons why the US-Taiwan relationship is so important to US national interest. Hitting democracy, hitting the security issue, the importance of arms sales and support for Taiwan's security, and of course cultural non-profit organizations and other institutions and platforms in which the United States and Taiwan can cooperate, not just in the interests of our citizens in either country, but globally, can jointly partner and have an impact globally on the sorts of issues that are impacting us. And gosh, certainly we're seeing plenty of those in this year, more than our fair share, perhaps. Senator, if I could pivot for a second here to an issue that I think perhaps within the business community can have supporters and perhaps some who advocate against, and that's industrial policy. The importance for the United States, particularly in this pandemic period, of identifying areas where we are particularly vulnerable, because I would certainly argue our interest in letting the supply chain only focused on cost and convenience has robbed the United States of key areas of national interest for our own home-based production. One critical area I would focus in on is the semiconductor industry. We have excellent cooperation with Taiwan. Taiwan Semiconductor is a hugely important company for our companies. And of course, they've recently announced a significant investment in several of your colleagues' state of Arizona. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, to the extent that you're aware of the CHIPS Act, specifically focused on semiconductor, but generally where you feel the Senate is heading, and you personally are heading, in respect to industrial policy in this pandemic period, and how the US can appropriately position itself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think whether it's a supply chain involving our pharmaceuticals or our PPEs or semiconductors, these are very important indigenous industries to be able to maintain. Indigenous doesn't mean that they're necessarily, only in the United States, but that we have a shared interest from allies that share our values to invest in that area, and hopefully in the United States. But if you look at the CHIPS Act, if you look at where the Senate is, I think in moving forward with that, in the CARES Act and other ideas about trying to make the the next package of COVID relief, of COVID-19 relief efforts. If you look at how we should focus on supply chain issues, I look at it from an issue of a standard of competitiveness. If we force any industry to do business in the United States because we've decided that we're going to force them to do that, is that the most effective, efficient economic argument? The most effective economic argument is to have the best place to do business. the best place to do business from a regulatory standpoint, from a economic environment, from a tax environment, from a competitiveness standard. And when the United States leads on competitiveness, meaning that we have a tax code that people want to work with instead of against, that we have a regulatory environment that people can invest in instead of being pushed back from, that we have an economic environment that people want to be a part of instead of, gosh, should we look somewhere else? That's what's going to lead U.S. investment, whether it's Taiwan investing in the United States expanding our partnerships with Taiwan. That's how we lead, and that's what our supply chain efforts ought to focus on. And so I do think we need to make sure from a national security perspective that we have a strong and vibrant semiconductor industry in the United States. Taiwan, a great ally, we can share that opportunity with, but we need to make sure that we, from a national security standpoint, have that, and from an economic power standpoint, be able to be leading on these issues is incredibly important.
Thank you so much for that. You know, as you were explaining your position on that, it struck me that the ability for what you've done with the TAIPEI Act and the advocacy you've presented on the bilateral trade agreement and what you've just presented and advocated for in respect to American competitiveness and the importance of creating an environment here in the States that is attractive globally, because if we get that right, the money will come, so to speak.
That's right. Yeah, you don't have to, Congress shouldn't have to pass a bill that says thou shalt only do business here.
Yes.
We should create an environment that everybody wants to come here. That's what the United States used to stand for. It used to be, and we're starting to get to that point. Obviously, COVID-19 created a massive disruption around the globe, but as we get out of this, people are going to be looking at doing business in the place that is most welcoming to business.
Yes.
And that means jobs, opportunity, and economic engagement, and yes, national security. And we need to make sure the United States is able to do that. That will benefit Taiwan. That will benefit our allies around the globe as we do that.
Yeah, and of course, pushing that vision together with a bilateral trade agreement to ensure that the partnership between the U.S. and Taiwan has as few barriers as is possible is naturally in the interests of both our people.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at the TAIPEI Act, when we obviously it's signed into law, when we passed it out of the Senate, it contained language on a free trade agreement that was taken out in the House. The Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, we had a very similar experience with the Ways and Means Committee, but in the House. But these are two pieces of legislation put together that talk about that importance of engagement and economic investment with Taiwan. From arms sales, regularized and routine, to that further capacity building for additional trade. We have a U.S.-Asia energy partnership that we created in the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act. I've spent a lot of time talking to leaders in Taiwan about their energy transitions and renewable energy, the green energy future that they desire, and how we could utilize Colorado companies for that, or U.S. companies for that investment opportunity. But a BTA, TAIPEI Act, the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, probably more advancements. I think the last couple of Congresses have really solidified U.S.-Taiwan relationships in a way that we haven't seen for a very long time.
I absolutely agree with you, Senator. I had the privilege of joining this organization back in '94. And in my personal opinion, we have not seen, I'm going to be somewhat repetitive because I sort of hit this a wee bit with you before, but we have not seen this kind of depth and breadth of support. And what encourages me most about it is it should ensure that if the storms get if it gets a wee bit stormier, the substance of the relationship is going to steer US-Taiwan relations mostly in the right direction. And that's hugely encouraging. Because as you've forcefully advocated, Taiwan's democracy is so important for our country in advocating a vision in the region that is not the vision that the Chinese have been advocating and what we've seen in Hong Kong.
Right. Look, and this is more than a one-way street relationship. This is back and forth on everything that we've talked about, from democracy to economies to security to people, and then Hong Kong. And let's be clear about what happened in Hong Kong. You cannot get any more pro-Beijing than Carrie Lam, and yet China still wasn't satisfied with the fealty coming out of Hong Kong, and they basically have destroyed the special autonomy that we had, the world had agreed to. And so, this is a real eye-opening experience and lesson for all of us as we look at how best to stand with Taiwan against a decision that China could make to turn it or try to approach it like they have Hong Kong.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So, Defense Secretary Esper in the past week made a comment about Taiwan and one country, two systems, and what was happening in Hong Kong. And the comments he basically made was, how could anybody on Taiwan be left who actually believes that the Chinese will follow through on one country, two systems? Do you think that's reasonable?
It absolutely is. I mean, unless you're getting the paycheck from Beijing, there should be no one left in Taiwan thinking.
Yeah. If I could pivot a little bit to former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley.
Yes.
She's a really strong advocate, and she's so articulate and so well presented on China-related matters. And she's so excellent on Taiwan. And Ambassador Haley has been talking a wee bit about the importance of more clarity in the US-Taiwan relationship, Senator. And what she was driving at was, in the legacy relationship, we had embraced strategic ambiguity and all that came with that. And I wonder, do you feel that it's time for more clarity in respect to US intent regarding Taiwan, particularly around the security and integrity of the country itself?
Well, absolutely. I think the more clear we are, the less room for misinterpretation or false actions there will be. I think we have to make crystal clear where we are, and I think that clarity matters. It matters to our relationship with China. It matters to the world as we look at how we approach and deal with Taiwan, China, and geopolitical issues. So I think the globe needs to hear that clarity for our purposes. China certainly needs to hear it, and the people of Taiwan absolutely must hear it. And I think our actions show it. Whether it's a effort on the BTA, whether it's a effort on the TAIPEI Act or the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act or the Interpol legislation or the Participation Act or high-level visitation to Taiwan. All of these start to get there, but let's not leave room for nuance and interpretation. Let's be clear.
Yeah, it's a welcome comment that you make, Senator. For absolutely, for sure. We more transparency on U.S. intent. I would absolutely argue is necessary. It's interesting that the Chinese really do appear to be chafing at the expansion, the growing depth and breadth of US-Taiwan relations. Again, as I'm sure you know, the historic relationship and understandings with the Chinese on Taiwan were predicated on the Chinese pursuing peaceful outcomes in respect to Taiwan. Of course, with their forced modernization, their coercion economically, culturally, in fact, in every phase of their engagement with Taiwan, we have not seen them embrace the understanding that we had in the late 70s and early 80s that our entire switch in recognition was predicated on peaceful outcomes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what's amazing to me is a successful Taiwan increases opportunity in China. I mean, the businesses and the opportunities they have, and yet there is this sense of jealousy or I guess indignation about the success of Taiwan. And I think that's hard for people in the United States to understand. And we see it in Hong Kong and how the reaction of Beijing has been toward Hong Kong's success. I remember in Hong Kong, stepping back a little bit about this, I remember the first time I visited Hong Kong as chairman of the Asia Subcommittee on Foreign Relations. We visited with a number of civil society leaders, voices of democracy that have been in Hong Kong for decades, and there was some hope that President Xi was going to be a reformer. And maybe it wasn't hope, maybe it was just sort of gosh, it really can't be as bad as we're concerned, so we're going to try to glean some opportunity here. That maybe there was this hard line that was being taken so that there could be an opening. And it was a few short months after my visit that it became clear, no, that is not going to be the case at all. And then, of course, the protests continued in Hong Kong. The disappearing of bookstore owners continued, and the scientists now and leaders, there was some glimmer of hope that the judicial system in Hong Kong would provide them with that last straw of hope to freedom. And then they managed to wipe that away with their extradition laws, and of course now the national security laws that they have put in place. So you see that happen, and as it applies to Taiwan, what it means, I think that really is how, if we aren't careful, the road will travel.
Yeah. I thank you, Senator. We got a question from one of our members about Secretary Pompeo's China speech last week, and really hard and tough on the CCP, as it should be. I must admit, I particularly like the fact that the Trump administration talks about the Chinese Communist Party and attempts to create some space between the CCP and the people of China, and all that goes with this. How do you feel Taiwan's security environment? What increasing role do you think the U.S. should play as the Chinese increasingly infringe on Taiwan's security environment? What would you like to see us do more of?
Absolutely, and that's kind of the heart of the TAIPEI Act, really, and the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act. What we need to be doing, number one, of course, is regularly and routinely providing Taiwan with the necessary articles of defense for Taiwan. I think I just noticed the other day another arms sales to and with Taiwan. So certainly that relationship needs to continue to grow. But the United States, through the TAIPEI Act and other powers of the federal government, we need to engage the world in the relationship with Taiwan, and to make sure that that they don't just sort of come in and with a sort of fast and furious fashion do what they did to Hong Kong from an economic standpoint, from a rights standpoint, from a trade standpoint, and certainly, God forbid, from a military standpoint. So I mean, I think getting the globe engaged in this relationship matters, and and in the aftermath of Hong Kong, it shouldn't be that hard for Europe, UK, France, and others to say, not again. We're not going to allow this. We were lulled into a sense of complacency in Hong Kong. See what happened. We're not going to let that happen with Taiwan, and that's U.S. leadership that's going to be required at the United Nations, in every organization around the globe, whether it's a healthcare organization or a telecoms issue. We need to stand up for this and engage them, because once we do that, it's more and more difficult for China to do something nefarious.
100%. As we hopefully, sir, move out of the pandemic period, as non-linear as that appears it's going to be, one of the fears I have about the tremendous brand strength Taiwan has built during this period, not only how they've handled it domestically, but also how they've behaved internationally. It's a huge story. But as countries around the world start to grapple more deeply with the economic ramifications of shutting down their economies, I do worry about the ability of the Chinese to bring economic leverage to bear, to curb some of that goodwill and some of the willingness on the part of new countries to look at Taiwan afresh and reassess their relationship. And it's great to hear you identify that, and also to see a role for voices like yours in that effort.
Look, I remember one evening, and so it was early morning in Taiwan, speaking with the foreign minister about their contact tracing ideas that they had and that they wanted to share with the United States to help us do a better job in our COVID-19 response. I don't think we heard anybody from China calling to figure out how they could help. In fact, we heard their calls saying, "Hey, don't look at us, or because we didn't do anything wrong." And so I think that when it comes to Taiwan, they've shown leadership. They want to provide leadership, and it's the right values, the values of freedom, the values that respect the dignity of human life and human rights, and open and transparent. So, sure, are there some trade issues that we are going to have to work through in order to get a BTA through? Yeah. Are there some, some protections that we're going to have to work through that they may have that may be more difficult? Absolutely. But they're all in line with the kinds of values that we share that can be worked through in mature democracies. And that's exactly what you're talking about here.
Yeah. Senator Gardner, it's the top of the hour, sir. We want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate your time this afternoon. Just finally, the TAIPEI Act is an important new development. Is there any final call to arms you'd like to make to the U.S. business community on this legislation, and then just generally how to support the efforts of you and your colleagues in the U.S. Congress in improving U.S.-Taiwan relations?
Absolutely. Building those relationships with members of Congress and understanding and building up their understanding, our understanding of what this relationship means to our economy, what it means to states like Colorado or wherever they are in the United States, how those businesses work together, what a system of U.S. Taiwan leadership can mean for the world, and particularly in Asia. Look, as we identified in the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, you're dealing with an area of the world that has 50% global population, 50% global GDP in the not so distant future. We need to have strong alliances like Taiwan, not just for us, but for the region in Asia, to be an example of what can happen when you have a democracy and the opportunities they do. So that is something that I hope that we can continue to pursue and highlight, and your role that you can play with the interlocutors, so to speak, in the U.S. government as it relates to Taiwan can be to enhance the education level and that commitment and that relationship.
That's excellent. Thank you. Just a thought on how we see that barometer going up and down. When U.S.-Taiwan relations are strong and vibrant, we have a strong and vibrant U.S.-Taiwan Business Council. When we're struggling a bit, as we have done over the last 15 years in certain areas, we see it in respect to the vibrancy of our organization and the willingness of businesses to support it. There really is a direct correlation, and that's why we feel so strongly right now about how much energy, vibrancy, and positive direction there is, because we're really seeing it in the advocacy and energy of American companies.
Well, thank you, and thanks for being a part of our effort to build trade, to build opportunity, and to create opportunities for our people and the people of Taiwan.
Senator Gardner, thank you so much, sir. We're so grateful for your leadership. I hope very much sometime in the future you'd be willing to do this again, and hopefully travel will get going again, and we'll all be able to head over, and you can hit the night markets and eat some of that fantastic food with President
Absolutely. Tsai. I'm looking forward very much to doing that once again, and we'll get through this together. So thank you for being a part of it.
Great. Thanks, Senator.
Thanks. Take care. God bless.
Yeah, take care.